Welcome, wrestling fans, to InterMat, and our guest today needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. You know him from MatScouts and InterMat and Twitter, X, message boards. It is Willie Saylor.
How we doing, Earl? How we
Uh,
doing?
doing doing great. I know this past week has been pretty busy for me knocking out recruiting rankings. And, as I was getting into them last week, I was like, let's just get really, really geeky with this because I know, you've been working on the various big boards and
Yeah.
different articles of first calls I love. So, I figured let's do something the recruiting junkies really like.
Yeah, I love it. I mentioned on a show the other day when I think I was doing the sophomore big board, but um it's really starting to come along. I think it's starting to get a little bit more mass appeal where people are following along the recruiting. They understand the importance of recruiting, and it helps when um they're pretty accurate, right? It helps when if if they're ranked in a certain order and they have a certain validity to them over the years, that people now can be like, all right, we better start paying attention to these because they seem to work out, they seem to pan out. And there's always some variance, but they understand the importance and the accuracy of them. So I think wrestling fans are really starting to, as opposed to maybe 20 years ago when the confetti fell at NCAAs, 90% of wrestling fans went away for the summer and they'd come back in the fall. Now they're sticking around. They're watching freestyle. They're watching the results. They're watching for the recruiting information. And you got your recruiting rankings out before me this year. Usually I'm first or we're right around the same time. But man, I don't know about you, but when that whole coaching carousel was going on, the David Taylor stuff, and like a lot of the portal, the guys that were in college, a lot of the portal stuff, that set me back a little bit. So I'm trailing.
Yeah, I know. I looked at last year, and I had them published around the 16th or 17th, and I distinctly remember, and I'll let some people behind the curtain because I just kept pushing it out, kept pushing it out, and one of the things was Zan Fugit. I know we both heard that he was going to Wisconsin after he had committed to Oklahoma, and you had the coaching
Yeah.
change, and
Yep.
he
Yep.
hadn't announced it publicly at that point. Wisconsin wouldn't have cracked the top 25 for me. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't put this out, knowing that he's committed here, or I can't put it out with him not publicly admitting he's
That's
going
right.
to
Yep.
Wisconsin.
I remember that. I remember that. It's a fine line because you want to get them out. People are dying for them to come out, whether it's the big boards or the recruiting class rankings. Um, and now, I said on another show again, you you start the last few years, the SIDs are getting into it, and InterMat has us 15th in the country, recruiting class rank. It's pretty cool. Or like Oklahoma landed, seven guys on MatScouts big board or something like that. It's pretty cool they get into it too. But on the flip side, like, I mean, I'll never live it down. Like Mitch Mesenbrink, number 59, you know,
Yeah.
uh, he was perennially, like every major tournament he went in, he was fifth and sixth, fourth, fifth, sixth, fourth,
Mm-hmm.
fifth, sixth. And I had him number 59. I thought he was a really good recruit. I didn't know um, the levels that he jumped between Super 32 as a senior and junior trials as a senior. And he went out there and beat Levi Haynes and a bunch of other guys, and he looked amazing. And so
Yeah,
that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. But you know, um,
that's going to live on because we're going to do these things every time there's the NCAA finals. You're going to have the recruiting rankings for each of the guys, and Messenbrink's going to be there, and it's going to be like, okay, he's 59, but he really wasn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'll get going. I'm kind of jumping around. For those of you out there, we're talking a little bit 2024, but a lot of just kind of recruiting in general too. So, um, we're both doing recruiting rankings. There have been times where we've both done similar projects. I've sent you what I have, or you sent me what you have, and we
Yeah.
kind of look at it. I purposely didn't want to do that for recruiting rankings this year because I don't want that to, cloud my judgment and make me
Yep.
double and triple guess myself. So the first thing is, what did you think about them? Was there anybody kind of glaring high, low that you hadn't anticipated?
No, no, there wasn't. I thought it was pretty. I thought the group that you had was pretty spot on. There's a couple teams that um I would jockey around position with, but it largely goes in what you value. And there's sometimes when I do them, I'll have a team that's like I'll have like Ohio State number 7, and they have 2 guys, and then I'll have number 8 Virginia Tech, and they'll have like 7 guys from 50 to 100. And I'm like, it's really hard to juxtapose those two and say one's better than the other when if one kid gets burnt out, that class is bust. But if he doesn't burn out and he's ranked 12th overall, like that's a dynamite class. And so when you get down to it and you really try to differentiate, there's a lot of different types of classes, I
Yeah,
remember, I think Logan Stieber's year, I had Ohio State's class ranked high, and it was Logan Stieber and nobody else. Like really, like 2 like decent kids, but I'm like, man, he's like the number 1 pound for pound guy. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started doing them, I think I was sucked in more to that. Wow, they got 8 top 100 recruits.
So was
One
I.
of them is 45. The rest of them are between 65 and 100. And as you see these classes and how they pan out, 5 years later, um, that class with 2 to 3 studs, you might have 2 multi-time All-Americans where you didn't have much out of that gigantic class.
Right. And I used to even write in the articles, in the write-ups, like a term I would use often is they're going to get at least 3 or 4 years of service from this guy, right? He was a number 60 coming out, and he's going to Bucknell, and he's going to be a surefire starter for them, probably going to make EIWA finals. And that would be very highly valued from a team perspective, right? But perhaps like 3 of those guys, team point wise, at NCAAs doesn't equal 1 Vincenzo Joseph, you know?
Mhm.
And back in the day, I used to really, really value look, they're going to get 6 starters for the next 4 years. More than half their lineup is going to come from this class. This is tremendous for this program. And it was. But, it comes down to, and I wanted to ask you, I want to get your opinion on this, but it comes down to, do you value the value to the program, the totality of the program, the full season, what it means to their duels, what it means to their dual record, their tournament their tournament ledger, their conference tournament? Or does it go back to the old cliche, the only thing that matters is NCAAs? And over the years, I have gradually moved from really giving love to the big classes that serve it, that fulfill the needs of the program and reinforce the needs of the program, that make a Lehigh better, that make a Kent State better, and going more to the blue chippers, more to the guys that really have that portend to being an All-American. Now, my question to you is, I was thinking about this when you sent me the idea for the show. Do you think that's the right move, number one? And number two, do you think like over the years, you're saying the same thing I am. Back in the day, you sort of favored or you sort of valued the class respective to the program. Do you think part of our sort of migration towards more of the blue chippers, towards frankly, towards more of the NCAA points, is because we've seen the regular season be less important? The guys sitting, duels not mattering as much, coaches sitting their guys, the holiday tournaments not being as robust. Um, the coaches have largely dictated, have largely reinforced the notion that only NCAAs matter. Up until all the way to the extent that they'll medical forfeit in the semifinals of Big Tens, right? So maybe we did that because over the years we learned that the truly valuable, most valuable classes were the upper echelon elites. Or maybe part of that is because that the coaches sort of prescribe that.
Yeah, and I didn't think of it that way as far as how the regular season works out now. But kind of the bigger question you're saying, um, at least the top half of the rankings, I feel like I go towards that, the blue chippers, the even if it's a small class, this year Ohio State, I had them at number 5, but they had the number 2 or number what Davino and Ethan Burden. That's 2 top 21 kids, I think it was. So, at the end of the day, that's probably going to be pretty good for them. So, but
Yep.
as you get into the bottom half of it, I do tend to kind of work into these programs, and I put a disclaimer at the top of the rankings, and I'll kind of go through it here, where Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, they get a guy that's 50th, 60th in the country, and he places 7th or 8th, once or twice for them. That kind of, it is what it is. It's no disrespect to that, but for those programs, it's not game changers. But
Yeah.
Bucknell, Cal Baptist, they get a guy that's a multiple time All American. Like, that's a big
Yeah.
freaking deal for those guys.
I mean, I take classes, like I always look back at the class with Logan Stieber, and it was sort of just him. And I look back at, and frankly, it I might be contradicting myself here. You know, I, my opinion has changed over the years, and I look at things different ways. Like to me, Logan Stieber was a shoe in, can't miss, right? And I had him number 1, and I had his class to Ohio State ranked really high. And I always remember a few years later, Vincenzo Joseph, who I had 7, maybe 9, something like that. He was the only commit to Penn State, right? And I didn't rank that class at all. So I asked myself, like, okay, Logan Stieber, singular recruit, ranked class. Vincenzo Joseph, singular recruit, I didn't rank him at all. Why? There's sort of a hypocrisy there, or it sort of doesn't align. But I felt that Logan was can't miss.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like there's probably at least some question about Vincenzo compared to, Logan.
Yeah. But so, back to the what do you value thing, if you look at it, like, if you take the 3 years that Vincenzo Joseph wrestled at NCAAs, because he missed the final year because of COVID, if you took his NCAA scoring, he was what, first, second?
Yeah.
I bet you, he single-handedly scored more points than almost every other class that year, that his graduating year, right? So it's tough, man. It's tough. It's half a dozen of one and 6 of one, half a dozen of another.
Yeah, and I was talking to somebody recently. I like recruiting so much just because it's such a positive subject for everybody that you talk to. Like, you're talking to these coaches, and it's like, yeah, man, we got this guy. He's a hammer,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy to sign him. You're
Yep.
not getting anybody saying like, man, we had three guys we were really close to. We would have loved to have. Our
Yep.
class would have been much better. And all these guys, they haven't discovered beer and women and injuries and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
so it all looks really good on paper.
Yeah. And, that's the tough part. You never know. It's becoming more, I think it's becoming more accurate than it was 15, 20 years ago. But I think that's because the sport is largely becoming, I guess, cleaner. I think it's getting more competitive. I think 20 years ago, you could probably take shortcuts and party and not do everything the right way and still maintain a level of greatness in high school. And now I think like the work ethic from college has sort of filtered into high school and hell, maybe even into junior high. And you can have all the talent in the world. If somebody's outworking you, you're going to get caught up. If you're taking shortcuts and you're not doing the things you want to do, things you should be doing, you're going to get burnt. So I think back in the day, 15, 20 years ago, um, you could be a 3-time state champ, but you didn't have the greatest work ethic. You didn't have the greatest discipline. Um, Nowadays, if that's the case, you're not a 3-time state champ because somebody outworked you, somebody out surpassed you. You know.
And I think that also, like, if you're seeing the Ivy Leagues being better, and these academic, Stanfords and stuff like that. You know, you're seeing these kids going to those types of schools more than they did, 20, 25 years ago. And I'm assuming if they're working hard enough to get into Stanford, they're probably living a
Yeah.
pretty complete total life.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, the moral of that story is the point of that is that I think there's less misses than there now than there were, um, in the past, and so it kind of works out a little bit better.
Okay, so that kind of works into something else I wanted to get into. So, people of our age, we talk about Fargo, and it's like that was the place to be. Every tournament was stacked, every weight class. NHSCA seniors.
Yep.
Those were kind of your tournaments. And I feel like from a recruiting perspective, when you only have two tournaments really to judge guys by, and even seniors, the guys should have been
Yeah.
signed at that point. Um, it leads to, you've seen guys that have had good tournaments in Fargo as sophomores or juniors, and for whatever reason don't get up to that level again, or aren't consistent enough. So
Yeah.
if that's kind of your big benchmark, then you're getting guys that were ranked pretty highly that didn't have as good of a complete high
That's a
school
great
career as they may now.
That's another great point. That's another great point because far back in the day, like if you had a good week, if you had a good weekend, one weekend a year, if things went your way, or if you were peaking and the comparable recruit over here, um, just something was amiss. His dog died, or he
Mhm.
stubbed his toe, or he didn't get a good night's sleep, and your whole recruiting profile was based on 1 or 2 weekends a year, right? And now it's there's events all the time. The top kids face each other all the time, and there's a lot of data. Um, and so a lot of times I'll have a guy ranked 37th on the big board that lost 2 weeks ago to number 56. And people will say, Willie, he just lost to him. And I say,
Good
I
body
like
of
what I
work.
I like what I like. Body of work. Yes, he lost. I mean, a very acute um, situation like that comes, how many times in a tournament you oftentimes see A beat B in the quarters and lost to him on the backside, right?
Yeah.
Now extrapolate that over the course of the whole calendar or whole 4 years of high school, and just because you beat somebody does not make you the better recruit, in my opinion. I mean, there was a kid out of Tennessee, Jojo Yurichuk, right? He's a sophomore this year. I think he won NHSCA's last year. He won NHSCA's this year. He did really good elsewhere. Well, he went to NHSCA's this year. He won the whole thing. And he beat a couple guys. He beat one in particular guy. 3 weeks later, in Vegas at the cadet trials, he didn't place, and he lost to that same kid 8-0. So it's like, you know, we have more data points. We have more data points now that you can get a mulligan, right? If you perform well in 7 of 10 events, you're gonna get the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes where in the past, if you just took that one single tournament and Joe Yurichuk didn't place in Vegas, you're like, how good he is.
Yeah, I think something also from, 15, 20 years ago when you didn't have as many media outlets and didn't have as many tournaments and stuff like that, you get caught up in, well, this guy's a 4-time undefeated Montana state champion. This guy's and you wouldn't be able to necessarily put that into context about, okay, well, he might be a 4-time Nebraska state champion that's undefeated, but the Pennsylvania guy that won it one time might smoke him.
It's a man. You know how fans are, and I love high school wrestling as much as anything, and I love the people. I love the kids, the dads, the coaches, parents. But one thing that needs to be written that I'm usually the one that, like, I'll say whatever I feel and you can react to it. But what I haven't yet mustered up the courage to do, like, the biggest college busts of the decade. And bust is a really interesting term, but I mean, at the same time, you're lauding them for how great of a high school career they had and how, for lack of better terms, disappointing their college career was. But I mean, there were so many guys that were just whizzes in high school, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Your Fox Baldwins and your Ben Whitfords and guys like that. But yeah, it's one guy that's like that. I mentioned Joe Yurichuk, but one guy that's like that in your article, and you sort of alluded to it, was Jaden Robinson for NC State. And it's like he didn't place at Fargo and he didn't place at Super 32, but like he totally balled out at Powerade. I mean, the dudes he beat, that's undeniable. You can't, like, the dude got game. So there's pros there. There's pros and cons there. And it's a roll of the dice. He could be a great one. He could be a great one at NC State, or he could be, a valuable backup. You don't know. It's difficult to evaluate.
So from 2024, we watched your big board show, and you went through and talked about a lot of, I think, the top 50. So kind of outside of that, like top 75 type kids, or maybe 75 and higher, who would be somebody that, and maybe because of the rankings, maybe you're going to say number 75 and number 76, but who would be some guys that you really like?
Higher. Well, just looking through number 80, Augie Hibbler, who's committed to Northwestern. I think he had a really interesting high school career. He bounced around a couple different high schools. He had some downs, but then he was up late in his career. I think he could be a good one for Northwestern. Northwestern also picked up Billy DeCraker in next year's class. So I think they're going to get a bunch in 2026 too. I think there's some good targets. But I think Augie Hibbler might be one. Let's take some deep ones. 97 Charles Curtis from Massillon Perry, going to Northern Illinois. I think he could be really tough. He another guy blossomed late in his career. Let's see here.
Yeah, and I like the Northwestern thing because, I think when we talk about recruiting, you hear people say how they committed there, they, transferred out, but also in the middle of all that, they've developed a lot of guys over the years too. So,
Yeah.
guys around kind of his profile.
Kyrell Levell from Indiana, 149 going to the Citadel. He was something like second, first in Indiana and knocking on the door at Super 32, just never really got over the hump. I had him at 131. I think he goes to the Citadel sort of in a very disciplined environment and does the right things. Coming out of the SoCon, I think he can make a real dent. Andrew McMonigal, number 140 going to North Dakota State. There's 2 PA upper weights going to North Dakota State. You don't see that a lot, PA to North Dakota, but McMonigal is one of them. I think he can be really good. Let's see some others here.
Yeah, I assume that was Hayden Hidley's going to North Dakota State. And, I'll talk a little bit while you're looking. One thing I like to do, during recruiting is kind of trying to piece together how this guy ended up there. This is a club. This is a club coach that, this is Izzy guy. So Izzy's guys maybe going to go to Michigan, Iowa, Ivy type school. You have stuff like that after you've been following it for years that you can kind of piece together.
Wow, you know what? Yeah, it's always interesting following who goes where and sort of why. But North Dakota State, actually, just looking through them, because I was looking for the other PA kid that's going to North Dakota State, and that's Aiden Height, number 173. But North Dakota State does not have a bad class. Listen, they have Tyler Secoy from Georgia, and man, they're from all over the place. Tyler Secoy from Georgia, McGaina from Iowa, McMonigal and Height from PA. They got Shiloh Jones, Fargo All-American out of Idaho. They're not really. Oh, and they got Ezekiel Witt from Kansas, who was a placer at both Cadet Trials and in Fargo, and so they got a pretty interesting class. No like top 50 guys, but they got some guys.
Yeah, they're probably going to be one. I'm going to do an article with honorable mentions with some classes that were really valuable and well done, but just couldn't crack the top 25. And
that's I haven't done that. I do like a little blurb at the bottom on honorable mention. But I think it's great to recognize the classes that didn't make the top 25, but also were a great job by the recruiters, respective to their school. And was Army in your top 25?
No, and if they would have had those guys that flipped to North Carolina,
they got
I think they were they were looking like it.
They got hit pretty hard with a couple of the flips to Carolina, but that's one thing. Like Army respective to their profile, they've done a tremendous job at recruiting the last few years. I think last year they were pretty darn close. If they didn't have the most big boarders, they were pretty darn close. So the staff there doing a great job.
Yeah, let's see. I had them 17 last year.
Yeah.
Which
Right, and they were probably mostly from like 100 to 200,
Yeah.
something like that. So
Yeah, that's another thing where you're trying to put these things back together backwards. I see guy from national prep school. I'm like, okay, well, Scott Green probably
yeah,
either he's all over him or he isn't all over him. He probably knows something about him.
yeah.
So
Scott is, I
he
like
he
I
wouldn't he
joke and
wouldn't
say,
approve of your shirt like I don't approve of your shirt. He would
no,
hate it too.
I wore this on purpose just to stick in your crawl, but uh I joke around saying that greatest mind in wrestling and I know more than you and this and that. And like for 99% of the people, Scott Green knows the high school landscape really, really well. Like, I mean, he might know it better than me. He is on point.
All right, so let's not give him too much credit. Don't want him getting a bigger
No,
head.
I'll say
Get him
something
back
to
down to
knock him
earth.
down a peg. Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
something.
So after that's all said and done, you're looking back at recruiting classes. What do you think is a good number for all Americans for a singular recruiting class? Because like let's take the crazy Nolf Nickel Anthony Cassar, that Penn State class was just maybe the best ever, just stupidly good. But just in general, I don't know. I feel like two is pretty solid, and three All Americans is really you really got something.
I mean, I say if you get two in a class, I think you did a good job that year. Um, I don't know if you can really hope for much more. And it would be interesting to look back to see average number of AAs per class. I mean, it's so hard to AA too. I mean, there's schools that are really good, have a good following, are very competitive, have tough guys up and down the lineup, and haven't and are in an AA drought, right?
Hmm.
It's just really tough to place at that tournament. And so I think if you can get two AAs a year, I think you did a great job that year.
Yeah, that would be two is my number, and three is like you knocked it out of the park,
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
and that Penn State year kind of ruins it for everything else and everybody else, and I don't want to
Yeah, that was an
talk.
outlier, I think.
I don't want to talk prematurely, but looking at their class this year, you kind of, I don't know. Again, I don't want to talk
Yeah.
prematurely.
Well, a couple things there too is that number one, I think when you look at Penn State in totality under Kale, it's pretty much an outlier. Just throw it out. Like there's that what's going on over there, and then there's a norm for the rest of the country. Because early on in Kale's tenure, I said, 5, 6, 7, 8 years in, I said, well, the thing about Penn State is that, and everybody wants to say, well, they recruit well. Well, they recruit. Well, yeah, that's part of your job is to recruit. So don't just say they win because they recruit. But that being said, they've been fortunate that they didn't have a lot of misses. Um, you could bring in 4 top 100 guys, and you can almost bank on 2 of them aren't going to work out. They're just not going to work out. They're going to be not as good as advertised. They're going to have a girlfriend that takes away their focus. They're going to struggle with grades. They're going to get homesick. Something's going to happen. They're going to,
Injury prone.
injury prone. An under the radar guy ends up beating them out. Something happens, right? You can count on that. Penn State didn't have those, right? Very, very rarely. You can say without a fact. Now you can say, well, the Altons weren't as good as what they thought they'd be. Jimmy Gulabon, right? But Jimmy Gulabon, All American.
And was ranked number one in the country at one point.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was by flow. Dylan, one of the Altons AA'd, right? I don't know if it was Dylan or Andrew, but
Dylan, he was third at 57, but Andrew was the one who took kind of the country by storm at the beginning of his
yes,
freshman year at 41.
yep, yep. Um, so right, they've had a couple guys. I guess you could say
And
Robbie Howard didn't exactly light the world on fire, right? And he's been injury
Teasdale.
look, right? Yeah. So they've had a couple, but if you take the number of recruits that they've had, the number of top 20s, and look at their batting average, they're hitting a higher rate, a higher percentage than anybody else. So, about year 7 or so, I said, well, probably they can't continue to do that, right? But they have. And so at that point, then you say, well, it's their system. They not only recruit great guys, they have the right culture so that they don't get distracted, they don't get burnt out, they don't get a whole lot of injuries, and they develop them. So if you remove Penn State and you look at the rest of the country, and the norm is probably let's get 2 AAs out of a class. I think that's a good benchmark to hit.
Yeah, so you mentioned Penn State. There are a couple things, kind of misconceptions as far as recruiting, and you kind of started to touch on it with there. Um, a couple weeks ago, I did an article about kind of looking back at big boards and stuff like that. And over the past, I don't know what it was, 5, 6, so many years. Oklahoma State had more big boarders than more, not big,
Yeah,
more big, more. I think it was top 20 recruits.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think there was maybe Ohio State had an equal amount, and then Ohio State has signed more number one overall guys in the time that Kale has been there. So
Yeah, the last time I ran the numbers, and this was a few years ago, Ohio State was ahead marginally. Um, actually, I ran like the last 5 years, like a month ago, and Penn State was back ahead. But the Kale era, Ohio State was marginally ahead. At the last time I did it, Penn State could be ahead now, but that's true. The 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 narrative is that, or people that like to downplay the efficacy of Kale and that program is that, oh well, they just recruit better than everybody. No, that's not. You can't just recruit. You can't just recruit and just produce a winner. They have the entire package. Um, and
but I mean,
Oklahoma State has recruited really well. Really well. Ohio State has recruited really well, and Ohio State has really cashed in. Ohio State has always been really good, and that's another misnomer too. Sure, Penn State was not this level good ever before Kale. However, people like to say, well, Penn State just got good. Penn State was good forever. Penn State was good. Not this good, not great. They were good forever. Ohio
it was
State,
funny in those years prior to Kale taking over. Penn State kind of had the reputation of they would sign big name guys, and the big name guys wouldn't work out. Whereas the Phil Davises of the world, like
yeah,
there were underappreciated guys that kind of worked out more so than
yeah,
the stars.
yeah. They had they would recruit really well. Man, this is gonna you're not most of the viewers aren't gonna remember names like Adam Mariano and Jeff Knupp. Jeff Knupp was the number one heavyweight in the country. Went to Penn State, didn't do anything. Eddie Jane. I mean, there was a lot of guys. Penn State never had a hard time recruiting before Kale. But just like Penn State was good, but not to this level. I feel like Ohio State was good, but not to this level since Tom Ryan got there. And the recruiting has gotten amazing. Um, and
They've been
I think,
very consistently good, like
yeah,
consistently in the trophy, title hunt for pretty
yeah.
much
And,
all but, 1 or 2 years of Ryan's tenure.
in most sports, if you're a title contender every 3 or 4 years, you're doing pretty dang good. But when there's a dynasty going on, um, that certainly goes underappreciated. And what Tom Ryan is doing at Ohio State is amazing. The consistency there, what Tom Brands has done at Iowa, a lot of people like to flip the script and complain about Iowa's performance, but they've been by far, without a doubt, 100% by every metric in any analytical way that you can look at it, Iowa has been second best during the Kale era. And that's second best, right? So Tom has done a tremendous job. Oklahoma State has been steady. It seemed like, you know, they've had more attrition. They've had
Yeah.
more attrition with they've signed a lot of top 20s, but there's been a lot more misses with them.
Yeah, like that AJ Ferrari year, his I think his whole class or his close to his whole class was,
Decimated.
not, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
so I wanted to bring up a point though like a question for you that I was thinking about when you brought up the two number when we both agreed on the two number. Do you think that it's going to be more difficult to hit that number? Is it going to be more difficult for most programs to continue to recruit well when the floodgates are now open, basically unlimited scholarships? It's basically pay for play. It's basically the team with the biggest war chest is going to be able to take care financially a 2 or 3 deep, right? So now that kid 3 years ago, he could go to his dream school was Iowa. His dream school was Iowa, but they just signed a 49. Heck, they might have signed 2 49s. And 3 years ago, Tom would say, we love you. And we love that you want to be a Hawkeye. But we just don't have any money. We just don't have any scholarship money. Now, in 2024 and beyond, you can give them NIL. There's essentially no scholarship limit. So that kid that in 2015 dreamed of being a Hawkeye, but couldn't go there because it wasn't a financial fit. And so he went to Boise State and became, he took sixth, right? Maybe that doesn't happen as much anymore.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out, you know, what I think's going to happen because, as it is like a Penn State looking at this recruiting class, looking at, their existing roster,
Yeah.
people have to look at it and say, there's a lot of 65s, there's a lot of 74, 84 types, and they're still signing there. I don't know. As far as the school goes, I guess they probably won't be more inclined to, you might budget X amount of dollars for 49 and 57 and not want to go over that, 2 years ago. But now with what you can do, sure, why not?
Yeah. I mean, there's a debate as we speak happening on the Hawkeye message boards because Nelson Brands the other day said he intends on going 74. And so there's a discussion there on the efficiency of their scholarships and the efficiency of their lineup. And it would be better if, this guy could make this weight and this guy redshirted and this guy went up to 84. And so we get all the guys in the lineup and maximizing the point total and being better at duels. And, well, this guy's a stud. He could AA at any other program. Maybe he could definitely start at most programs. And we're tying up scholarship money now. And the reality is, for an Iowa, scholarship money, it doesn't matter if you have, for an Iowa. Now, it might matter at Virginia, right? It might matter at, I don't know, Little Rock or something. I don't know. But at Iowa, what I responded to was like, and they're all sort of losing their minds. They're ticked off about a problem. And what I said was, your quote unquote problem is your solution, because it's championship or bust in Iowa. And despite them being great, Cornell takes second and they're cheering, right? We're
Mhm.
runners up. It's great, right? ASU gets a team trophy, and wow, we had a fantastic year. There's a historic year for the program. Iowa takes second, and they want to go kick a puppy, right?
Yeah, it looks like a funeral in the team
Right,
picture at the end of the
right.
tournament.
So I said, guys, this problem that you're having, this quote unquote problem where you have maybe 574 pounders that are really good, that's what you've been complaining about Penn State having for the last 3 years. That's not a problem. Now you're on the right track, but you need that at like multiple weights. You need that competitiveness. And so I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting, and hopefully we'll have some clarity on this soon, because I know coaches I've talked to, they're trying to get this sorted out before the 15th rolls around, so they know how much
Yeah.
money that they've got to work with these rising juniors. But
Yeah.
yeah, it could be interesting if I assume it would go on a school by school basis. So school A maybe has 12 scholarships available, while school B sticks with 9.9 and school C has 13 or something. I don't know.
Yeah. And, it's different times, because we have NIL now, we have the portal, we have just in the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. What was it? Maybe 3 years now. You can talk to juniors on June 15th, rising juniors, which is a little earlier than it was previously. We have kids committing earlier. So 90% of the top 100, I would say a good 80-90% of the top 100 of 2025 are already committed. So on one hand, because of the early commitments, they can budget their lineup, they can budget their scholarship dollars and their NIL funds and all that. They can budget it a little earlier because they get earlier commitments. On the other hand, if a guy pops up in the portal, you're going to want to redo your budget because you really need a 41. And you might really need a 41, but then your 184 pounder that's a stud, he thinks the pastures are greener over there, so he goes in the portal. So now you need to take money from here and go to that. And so on one hand, it should be simpler. On the other hand, not so much.
Yeah, I love the recruiting aspect of it, but I don't envy the coaches for all of that juggling that you're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
So changing gears, one kind of random thing. On one of your recent shows, you said how you felt like West Virginia was a state that, a couple years from now, you're going to see a bunch of kids popping up and people are going to be wondering where they came from and when they got good. So
Yeah.
I felt like Tennessee is a state like that.
Yeah.
So one, speak to why you said that about West Virginia, but I also want you to piss people off and go on to the opposite end of the spectrum and say, what's kind of a state that has a good reputation. People respect kind of the
Oh,
wrestling, but you're kind of like, seeing the production from the recruits.
yeah. I mean, that's right up my alley. I had an idea back in, I don't know, during the school year where I thought, man, why the heck isn't this state like there's just nothing there? Comparatively. And so this summer I anticipate doing a series called The State of the States. Um, so maybe look for that. Where I'm gonna I'm gonna go through it analytically by a few things. Number of ranked guys, right? Number of big boarders, number of placers at majors, maybe number of D1 recruits, and then also look into the participation levels. How many kids did you have go to Fargo? How many kids did you have go to cadet trials? How many kids did you have go to NHSCAs? What was your participation like at Super 32? Right. So you can get a sense of not only quality, but also healthy numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
think it's easy to say this guy, this is the amount of college All-Americans from Virginia, but we don't know the rest of
Right.
the story.
Well, I think that sort of unsung heroes in this country, and we're man, are we ever in a golden era of wrestling? I don't know if most people realize that, but um, our youth have never been more prepared. We see Marcus Blaze going into his senior year, not even done. The kid's a junior in high school, and he's beaten Matt Ramos, and he's taken third at the Olympic trials. And you see it up and down with guys, Kyle Snyder winning a world title at age 18 or 19. Um, Jax Forrest and Bo Bassett and Aiden Valencia and on and on and on.
And I mean,
Um,
and that used to be that wasn't the norm. It was a big
no,
deal. Like Jason Sertsis, wrestling
yeah,
in college opens and doing some good stuff.
yeah,
That was kind of like the one or two guys from that time period that did stuff like that.
yeah. The Alan Freeds and the Kerry Colats became legends because of that. And Marcus Blaze is a legend, and Bo Bassett is a legend, but Jax Forrest will be a legend, right? But there's whereas previously you had a handful, I don't know, the Carr brothers and Colot and Freed, Sertzis. You had three this year, right? You had three this year. So, but I think the unsung heroes in wrestling in this country um, are the local coaches. I mean, there's a lot of dads and ex wrestlers, and they're starting and they're getting our kids prepared, and they're having big clubs, and they're getting participation. And whenever you get numbers, a couple of them are going to pop. And so that's why when I do the state of the states, I'm going to not only measure how good they are, but also if you have a lot of participants, if you have a lot of good numbers, that to me is a healthy ecosystem, right? That is eventually going to pop. It's going to produce. Kyler Sanderson's doing great stuff in Utah right now, for instance. But states that are on the rise, like I called Georgia 15 years ago. I could see it coming. Um, West Virginia. Now I don't know how healthy the numbers are in West Virginia, but the quality, they had two guys win NHSCAs, and like let me preface that by let me go further by saying It's not just that they won brackets. I never look at the name of a tournament, even Super 32, even Ironman, even Fargo. I never look at the name of a tournament and said, he won that, so he's great. Or he took fifth and he's great. Or he didn't play, so he stinks. You have to look at who they beat. Guys that they beat that had previously been really good, really successful. So sometimes you can win a tournament, and I don't think much of it because that field was weak. And sometimes you lose in the round of 16, and I'm like, that kid had an excellent tournament, right? So let me lead by that, saying that. But West Virginia had 2 kids win NHSCA sophomores. They have another kid that he actually took 5th, but dynamite bracket in juniors. Tennessee had at least 2 win sophomore nationals. One was a 215-pounder from Saudi Daisy from he's a prep kid, Ryder Smith, and the other one was Jojo Yurchuk. So you're right that Tennessee is on the come up. My boy's out there coaching now. You know that Zeke Moisey? He got some dudes.
Yeah,
he got some dudes. I don't know. I don't even know if he's at a school right now, or he just has a club. But he got some guys. He only has a couple, but they're good. They're good. So I think you're right. And another thing I like about Tennessee is only two state titles, so the cream rises to the top. But West Virginia, yeah, they have several young, good kids, and so I think Stephen Myers just came out on my big board today. He's going to be really good. Brock Keller, the heavyweight's going to be really good. Max Fortier is going to be really good, and yeah, I like West Virginia as a state on the rise. Tennessee is a state on the rise. Utah, a state on the rise. I'll tell you the one that's disappointing. And they can all get pissed off at me. Like, as you said, you asked for me to get pissed people off. New York.
I knew you were going to say that, and I don't disagree with you.
What is going on with New York? I mean, they don't have dudes. It used to be Jersey, PA, New York, Jersey, PA, New York, Ohio. This used to be that. That used to be where they came from. New York's going bye-bye.
Long Island. What happened to Long Island?
I don't know. You know, I went to Scott Green's house at Wyoming Seminary one time, and there was some New York people there. And I even see it when I'm seating NHSCAs. There's like a weird cultural thing where it's like, my kid was third in county. My kid was third in Long Island. And I'm like, bro, that was impressive in 77. That ain't impressive. This is 2024. Like they really put that down on their bio, like on their seating credentials, like second in New York County, in Long Island. I'm like, what? Long Island used to be that good, that meant a lot. It doesn't mean that much anymore. And I just don't see the quantity nor quality in New York. And it's disheartening because they one time produced so much talent, and the club level was so healthy, and perhaps it still is, but they don't go many places. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the state I worry about. I worry about New York because we need New York to be good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look at the, your state champions and seeing, who signed them, nobody signed them, and
right.
Or it's the last second deal where they're signing them.
Right. So there you go. It's not just me. It ain't me saying that these New York State champs aren't what they used to be. The coaches see that too because they ain't signing them.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of what I was hoping for. So,
let me ask you, that was the one you had that you thought
That's
too?
that's what I thought you might say. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Um, no, just I mean, looking at the big boards, I was looking at the 27 one you put out today, and I think you had one in the top 10, and maybe none after that.
New York, 2020, yeah, freshman. Um, Mangano is good, and Mangano won a state title this year as a freshman. He might have won it last year as an eighth grader too, and then he went to NHSCA's and won freshman nationals, and in the finals he beat Grayson Music from PA that was a state runner-up, and Grayson Music had a breakout state tournament. He beat senior returning state champ former state champ Louis Gill that signed to NC State. So that's where you get that confirmation, right? Like, okay, you won
mhm.
a state title at like 132 in New York, big school. Okay, you're probably pretty good. Let's see how good. Okay, now you beat this guy that beat this guy. So, yep, Mangano number
Little,
7. He beat Music, who I have at number 20.
just a little bit behind the scenes how the sausage is made right there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's tough, right? It's tough for particularly freshmen. I have a pretty good grip on the junior high scene nowadays. I started like I dipped my toes into it a few years ago for the first time, and I was like, I don't know how much these results will stick. Well, then I found out, like, so I did rankings, and then I was like, saw how they did at freshman, sophomore. I'm like, you know what? I got to continue to do this because just like the nation kind of found out, the fans in college wrestling found out that, yes, the top high schoolers going to college, pretty good correlation. I found out, and I was surprised to find out how the hit rate was. I found out that indeed the top junior high kids come on to be the top high schoolers. Um,
And
you
that's
know,
probably what you were saying earlier about, club coaches being
yeah,
unsung heroes and such, getting these
yeah.
seventh and eighth
I mean, another
graders
one
prepared.
we didn't even bring up, but like this year, D Lockett. D Lockett's a junior in high school. He beats a junior world champ and NCAA third Meyer Shapiro at the Olympic
kind of
Challenge.
kind of throttled him.
So yeah, they get younger and they're more prepared, and the amount of time and selflessness really that the youth club coaches put in, it's really easy to, and I'm not poo-pooing anybody, but it's really easy to um say Cal Sanderson's a great coach, and Zeke Jones has worked with the at the OTC, and Terry Brands has worked at the OTC, and Kevin Jackson has worked at the OTC, and he's a great coach, and Tom Ryan's a great coach. They're all great coaches, but these no name, selfless, faceless high school club coaches laid the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Do you have anything else that you have on your list you wanted to hit on? I don't
I
think we
don't.
hit everything.
Good conversation. I love talking about this stuff. I do. I have my recruiting class rankings coming up. I got done with the big boards this morning. Only thing left, big board wise, is top incoming freshmen at some point, but that'll be later. My first thing for me is recruiting class rankings, and then maybe that state of the state series, which I think will be pretty good and people will like. What do you got coming up?
Yeah, so if you're talking recruiting, I mentioned earlier honorable mentions.
Yep.
I'm also going to do kind of like a cumulative. I don't know if you want to call it ranking, but at least I have from the time you took over InterMat, all of our team recruiting rankings, kind of putting
Yeah.
that together and
You gonna do a historical
see
thing
how
on it?
yeah, see how now that we have 4 years of data,
Yeah.
who's who's the most consistent with your recruiting.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I wish I love that stuff. I'm glad you're doing it because I would like to do it. I just haven't, and that's a really good piece of content. Um, yeah, it's a fun time of year. Looking forward to maybe Fargo Olympics around the corner.
Yeah, well, about a month away from Fargo and
I wanted to
month
do
and a half
another.
from Olympics.
I will do another thing, like you said about you do the honorable mention stuff. I think it's really good, really important, and it gives some other programs some shine. I'm not going to do that since you're doing it. But what I am going to do is an article on like the top recruiters again. I did one last year. It
Yeah.
was kind of a big hit. You know, I saw you had a piece on Cam Sakura today. He was a guy that I had in my article last year. He'll probably be in it again this year. You know who's doing awesome? I'm going to give you a name, and you know it, but I'm going to tell the people that are watching this. Mike Dixon is crushing it at
Yeah.
Indiana.
I saw that
He
up
might
close in Virginia at ODU for quite a while.
he might be my recruiter of the year. He might be my recruiter of the year. He is slaying it.
Okay, well, now that you said that, that's led me into. So I started doing these. People say way too early lineup projections.
Yeah,
I'm calling them never too early because it's never too early to look
it's never
ahead.
too early.
So actually, Indiana is the next one I have on the docket. So I have
Mhm.
something put together for them. There are a couple guys I saw at U23s that weights were kind of like for Indiana, like okay, maybe this guy might be going up, like you know DJ Washington was one in particular. So I hopefully have a little bit of clarity, as much clarity as we can have in June on that particular subject. So that is the next couple of days. And
Well,
then I also got sent interviews from Mark Branch with James Hackney and a guy that was on your list for I'm pretty sure he was on your list of kind of undercover recruiters, assistant coach guys. Tyler Smith from Bucknell.
Tyler
Austin
Smith does
Summer
an
just talked to
amazing
him.
job. Good, good. I mean, there's so many guys. Tyler Smith is amazing. And I talked to him more over the last couple years. Um, Consider him a good friend now. I'm so proud of what he's done. Tyler Smith is doing great. Cam Sakura is doing great. McCade Ford at Wyoming is doing great. Eric Morrow. I mean, these are not household names, but they are crushing it in recruiting.
Yeah,
Trevor Brandvold probably a little bit more well known, but he's doing a great job.
yeah, he's one I see a bunch of Wisconsin names on that Minnesota list. I'm
How about that?
attributing those to him.
How about I put that stat out the other day?
What was that?
Minnesota has had 10 big boarders the last 2 or 3 years. Forget it was 2 or 3. 10 big boarders. 9 of them from Wisconsin or Illinois, Minnesota. All from right there.
Yeah, yeah, that's. I think that's at least we're talking about Wisconsin, maybe kind of a different discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right, man. So check out everything going on MatScouts. A lot of recruiting content. I
Got to do this more
oh,
often, Earl. This is good
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I almost thought I was kind of out of the woods with recruiting, but no, it's the recruiting rankings are done, but there's plenty to
Recruiting's
write
life,
about,
baby.
talk about. That's right.
All
All right,
right.
Willie.
Go Yankees.
No.